Welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast, where we provide education and inspiration to help guide you on your journey to look better, feel better, and most importantly, heal better. Hello, and welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin Schultz, and today we're going to talk about the importance of gut health and how to heal your gut, which is really part of all 5 pillars of foundational health. So to start, what is the gut? Technically, the gut is everything from your mouth all the way to your anus and really everything in between. The esophagus, the stomach, small intestines, large intestines, colon. But what often gets forgotten are things like the pancreas. It's part of the gut. The gallbladder, the liver for that matter, even though that's really not talked about. Well, we'll talk about the importance of those things today as well. And then that useless appendix that's way down there that God made the mistake and put in our body. At least that's what we're told. So what do we know about the gut? We know that 70% of our immunity comes from the gut. And that sounds pretty crazy to a lot of people, but that is so well researched at this point that really nobody disagrees with that statement anymore. Approximately 70% of all of the body's immune function comes from our gut. And we're going to dive into that today, why that is, and really answer all of those questions that you might have as like, how could that be? And then this one is even more mind-boggling to the average person, which is 70 to 90% of neurotransmitters, and we'll talk about neurotransmitters, but 70 to 90% of neurotransmitters are produced and housed in the gut. What does that mean? So neurotransmitters are things like serotonin and dopamine. And we know that we've historically been told, for instance, that serotonin and dopamine specifically come from the brain. If you've seen any pharmaceutical commercials on antidepressants, for instance, they talk about how the brain is off balance. It's not producing neurotransmitters the way that it's supposed to. Well, we now know that that's not true. 70 to 90% of those neurotransmitters, 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut and housed in the gut. So crazy important, even when it comes to mental health, to talk about how to keep your gut healthy, or if it's not healthy, which is the case, sadly, for the average person, then how to heal your gut effectively. We also know about the gut that there's trillions of bacteria in there. Those bacteria are good and bad. The good meaning probiotics, the bad meaning the bad bacteria that are constantly in battle and in war with the good bacteria. So we're going to talk about the importance of that as well. So many of you that follow natural health doctors online, that see a natural health practitioner, have probably heard the term start with the gut. Start with the gut really has a double meaning. One is that most diseases often start with the gut. And literally, most might sound like a pretty bold statement, but it's not just many. Most diseases start with the gut, and you'll fully understand how that can be and why that statement is very true when we dive into everything today. And then the second, because of everything that we just said in number 1, that most diseases start with the gut, the second part of start with the gut is that if you are going to heal the body effectively, you often have to start with the gut, or at least figure out, is the gut what's causing the problem that you're trying to address, that symptom that you're trying to address. So start with the gut, hugely important, and it's going to be the focus of almost everything that we talk about today. So you can't talk about the gut without talking about all of those bacteria that we mentioned earlier, the microbiome. So the microbiome is really made up of good and bad bacteria. And in the ideal situation, your microbiome, all of that bacteria in your gut, the good outnumbers the bad. That's the ideal situation. And the reason the good has to outnumber the bad, probably pretty obvious that you always want good to outnumber bad, but the good bacteria has nutrients in it and actually produces nutrients and healing compounds that help to feed the immune system. Most people just think of that bacteria of just kind of being in there, but it literally is producing things. And then the bad bacteria also is producing things. The bad bacteria itself can attack the gut lining, and then it also produces toxins. And these toxins, the most common one is called LPS. It's a lipopolysaccharide. Those toxins that the bad bacteria produces actually attack the gut lining, and it leads to something called leaky gut, which we're really going to dive into later. So when the bad outnumbers the good, which is way too common, when that bad bacteria outnumbers the good, it's called dysbiosis. So if you've ever heard that term before, that's what it means. Dysbiosis, bad outnumbering good. When that happens, immune system function decreases. When immune system function decreases, that is when you just become vulnerable to so many things. Whether it's COVID-19, whether it's the flu, whether it's that bug going around, you become more vulnerable because your immune system cannot respond in the same way that it is supposed to. And if you remember, we talked about 70% of your overall immune system function comes from the gut. And then because of leaky gut and your immune system functioning being down, autoimmunity goes up dramatically. So autoimmune diseases start with the gut, and you're going to really understand how that is today and how you can possibly heal from that autoimmune disease diagnosis that you may have. Some of the symptoms that come up when we talk about the gut, most people assume like if you have an unhealthy gut, you're going to know it because you have constipation, diarrhea, bloating, abdominal pain, all of the things that you think of with an unhealthy gut. And certainly those things are common, but it's also incredibly common to not have those things or to have those. And then in addition, you can have things like brain fog, lack of focus, the inability to sleep properly. Depression rates go up dramatically, we know, when somebody has an unhealthy gut. Anxiety rates go up dramatically when somebody has an unhealthy gut. Skin issues go up dramatically. Rashes, psoriasis. I can't tell you how many people in my office over the last 25 years I have helped heal from skin issues by simply addressing the gut. Not addressing the skin, but indirectly addressing the skin, because most skin problems start with the gut. And then we already talked about this, but autoimmune disease and other immune system problems are common symptoms. Hormonal imbalances. Most people don't think about hormones at all when we're talking about the gut, but we know that hormonal imbalances start with the gut. We know that hormonal symptoms worsen, especially when we're talking about women with menopause and perimenopause. So when we have that discussion, which I have all of the time in my office, in fact, it's probably the most common discussion that I have is, what can I do about my menopause symptoms? What can I do about my perimenopause symptoms? How can I improve those? Again, start with the gut. We look at the gut first, and if you heal the gut, often those symptoms will dramatically improve. Nutrient deficiencies are also crazy common. And this one, if you understand how the body works, this one's really easy to understand. Nutrient deficiencies, your body just simply cannot absorb the nutrients from the food and supplements that you take in when you have an unhealthy gut. Metabolism issues, weight loss. Often I hear people say, I seemingly am doing all of the right things. I'm exercising more. I'm eating the right foods. I'm drinking more water. All of these things that you're telling me to do, all of the things that I've read online that I should be doing, yet I still cannot lose weight. And it's often because metabolism issues start with the gut. Detoxification problems start with the gut. Blood sugar regulation, allergies, and so many others start with the gut not being healthy. And so it may sound like, I'm just kind of overplaying this, like that sounds too good to be true. You just fix the gut and all of these things happen. But when we dive into how the gut works and how our lifestyles are leading to the gut being unhealthy, you'll fully understand how I can confidently say all of the things that I just said, all of those symptoms, all of those diseases and diagnoses, how they can absolutely and often do start with the gut. And to partly understand that, actually a huge part of understanding that, is talking about what are the things that cause an unhealthy gut, what are often commonly called the gut health disruptors. So first and foremost is medications, unfortunately. The average American is on so many medications. The big ones when it comes to disrupting that microbiome, killing off the good bacteria, allowing the bad bacteria to flourish is antibiotics. Antibiotics are huge. We are going to talk more about antibiotics later. We're not going to take a deep dive into it, but I'll hopefully give you some really good takeaways for how to avoid antibiotics when you can, and then if you need that antibiotic, what you can do about that and how you can help your body to be healthier despite the antibiotic. Other medications, we know that proton pump inhibitors play a huge role and wreak havoc on the good bacteria. They stop nutrient absorption, beta blockers, antidepressants. And a lot of times people think like, oh, you have to be on a lot of these meds or you have to be on them for a long time to have a huge effect. And that would be fantastic if that were true. Sadly, that is not true. We know that even a single dose often of those medications can disrupt our gut. Pesticides literally kill bacteria. That's what they're designed to do. And yes, they kill bugs and bad bacteria outside of your body, inside of your body when they're getting in there on all of the foods that we often eat that contain pesticides. They're killing off the good bacteria, causing that dysbiosis where the bad bacteria now outnumbers the good bacteria. Processed foods. How do processed foods play a role? Well, they play a role in a few different ways. But if we're looking at processed foods, the large majority of them, especially the ultra-processed foods, contain high amounts of sugar, and they also contain really bad fats. So fat as a whole meaning fat as a whole from whole food is good, but the fats that we get from processed foods, what are often called the seed oil fats, those omega-6s, first of all, seed oils in themselves, not bad. Seed oils with what they do to them prior to putting them in a processed food, horrific for your gut. So these processed food sugars and processed foods fats, these things feed bad bacteria. Your gut, bad bacteria in there literally goes into feasting mode. They feed on those sugars, and then as a result, the bad bacteria will continue to grow and overtake the good bacteria. And this is a huge part of that dysbiosis process, upsetting that microbiome, starting that cascade of all of the things that we've talked about. Stress and anxiety. Stress and anxiety, we know that the more stress somebody has, the more anxiety somebody has, we know that that also throws off the good and bad bacteria. Environmental toxins, our cleaning products, our perfumes, off-gassing from our cars, our furniture, some of these things that are unavoidable. Lack of exercise. Most people don't think of that, but lack of exercise definitely causes a huge disruption in that microbiome where all of a sudden, due to all of the things that happen due to lack of proper exercise and movement with decreased oxygen levels, we know that the bad bacteria flourish, the good bacteria get killed off. Highly overlooked category is drinking chlorinated water. So let's stop with this one and think about this for a second. Why is chlorine put into our city drinking water? To kill bacteria, right? And I'm sure it absolutely needs to be there, so I'm not suggesting they take chlorine out of drinking water. I'm not suggesting they take chlorine out of the city water, rather, but prior to you drinking it, the chlorine absolutely should be removed. And this is where water filtration systems come in, because even the basic ones will remove the chlorine, because if you don't, once that chlorine hits the gut, it starts killing off that good bacteria, again, creating that unhealthy microbiome. Alcohol does the same thing, sadly, for most people. When you drink alcohol, kills off the good bacteria, allowing the bad bacteria to flourish. And what all of this does is it leads to something called leaky gut. I can't tell you how many discussions I've had with people about leaky gut over the years. Some discussions I would say that the majority of the discussions are fantastic. Most people have educated themselves on this, become so common in the natural world especially. But often I hear people saying like, oh, I talked to my medical doctor about leaky gut and they said that doesn't exist. It's just a term that's thrown out there. Your gut literally cannot leak. There's a protective barrier. It's impossible. That couldn't be further from the truth. The gut can leak. The gut does leak, honestly, with the majority of people. And we're going to talk about how that can be and what it does to the body. So to understand leaky gut, first you have to understand that within our gut, and now we're specifically talking about our intestines, there is a lining on the inside. That lining on the inside is the protective barrier. What that protective barrier does is technically two things. It keeps the bad stuff in and allows the good stuff out. So what does that mean in more detail? So if you're keeping the bad stuff in, that means any toxins your body absorbs, whether it is a pesticide or dyes from a processed food, those bad oils, it's help keeping the toxins in your gut so your body can properly eliminate it. It keeps undigested food in your gut. Pathogens like bacteria, viruses, and fungi that enter your gut. It keeps those things in the gut, again, so your body can eliminate it. But then what that gut barrier also does is it allows for proper nutrient absorption. And proper nutrient absorption, what that means is it allows the nutrients to get absorbed into the bloodstream. So we talked about this in my nutrition I think that was episode number 1, if I remember right. We talked about this on that podcast in some pretty good detail. It's a huge misunderstanding and really just lack of understanding that most people have about their body. Nutrient absorption happens in the gut, and what it means is those nutrients get taken up by your bloodstream and they travel to every single part of your body. So what you eat literally becomes your body. So if you're eating Doritos, you're sending horrible stuff throughout your body. If you're eating a whole food diet full of good meats and fruits and vegetables, you're sending good stuff through your bloodstream to feed the rest of your body. And then also, immune system support is huge with that gut lining. Those two things are enormous. And to understand those, I don't like to go into deep dives, but I really think that because leaky gut is such a huge topic, I think this is a really important thing to understand. So I'm going to cover the basics here. I'm not going to go deep into the science, but there are two things within that gut lining that are called occludin and zonulin. So you don't have to remember those names. Just know that occludin, basically its job is to it's a molecule that creates tight junctions. And it does what we just talked about. Those tight junctions from occludin will stop the bad stuff from getting out and allow the good stuff to get out. That's where zonulin comes in. Zonulin is a protein that talks to the occludin and allows the gut to stay closed or allows that lining to open up and allows nutrients out of the gut. But what happens is you get leaky gut, and all of a sudden, that just wreaks havoc on the body in so many ways. And this is just something that popped into my head. So let's talk about a little bit of a side note here. The blood-brain barrier, many people have heard that term. There's also a direct correlation between leaky gut and what's called often leaky brain. For the same reason, the blood-brain barrier, which the blood-brain barrier is on the outside of the brain, and that keeps the bad stuff from getting into the brain, allows the good stuff to get into the brain, also has occludin and zonulin. And once that occludin and zonulin basically gets out of control, then all of a sudden that leaky gut also causes brain issues. So really you have two different factors here when it comes to the gut affecting mental health. So the gut can affect mental health for the one reason that we talked about earlier, which is this is where 70 to 90% of neurotransmitters come from. But then also once that gut is unhealthy and leaky gut is in there, then the leaky gut also leads to leaky brain, where that blood-brain barrier is compromised and bad stuff gets into the brain, not enough good stuff gets into the brain. So leaky gut really allows toxins and bacteria through the immune system. And then what happens is now the immune system response is that this is really the way that the immune system works. The first line of defense often is the immune system creates inflammation. So in a normal situation, this is fantastic. So if you think of like a bee sting or a cut on your arm, what happens? It gets red around there, it gets swollen. That's normal. That's a great response. That's exactly what your body should do. It's the immune system kicking in, creating inflammation. That inflammation helps to heal that area. But the problem is, in a leaky gut situation now, you have chronic inflammatory response, a chronic inflammatory response that literally never stops. And that never ending process leads to whole body inflammation. And this whole body inflammation and the overreaction of the immune system is what leads to autoimmune disorders and so many other chronic conditions throughout your body. And this is crazy common. So leaky gut allows the bad bacteria to flourish and kills off the good bacteria. And so when you kill off the good bacteria, you're losing the ability for the good bacteria to do what its job is. What's its job? It allows for better digestion and absorption. It allows for the production of B vitamins and vitamin K. So those are some of the nutrients that the gut produces. Those good bacteria help to fight inflammation. The good bacteria kills viruses and pathogens in your body, and it does that without you knowing it on a regular basis. But when that can't happen and leaky gut increases, we know that autoimmune disorders, autoimmune diseases increase by 30-fold. 30-fold. That's a massive, massive amount. That means if you have leaky gut and you have it severe, autoimmune disorders increase by 30-fold. And sadly, most people don't know that. Most people aren't told that. Most people aren't taught that. They're just given a drug to further suppress their immune system instead of getting to the cause of the problem, which is let's fix that leaky gut so your body can do exactly what it was designed to do. We also know that leaky gut dramatically increases bone and joint inflammation, and it increases inflammation throughout the entire body, as we talked about. When you increase bone and joint inflammation, guess what that is? That is arthritis. So rheumatoid arthritis, most people that have that know that it is an autoimmune disorder, but it can also, leaky gut can increase arthritis throughout the entire body because of this chronic, rampant whole body inflammation. And arthritis, by definition, arth means joint, itis means inflammation. So the more joint inflammation, the worse the arthritis is. And then the bone inflammation, that's advanced osteoarthritis. So the longer that arthritis is there, it literally starts to create extra calcium, bony growth, bone spurs, osteoarthritis. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder that increases with gut issues. Thyroid diseases that are related to autoimmunity, adrenal problems that are related to autoimmunity, even ovarian and testicular autoimmune issues increase dramatically. And then inflammatory bowel disease, like Crohn's disease, the most common one, increases dramatically with leaky gut. So what causes leaky gut? We've already talked about a lot of them, but let's take a little bit deeper dive into that. Ultra-processed food is a huge, huge culprit. This is a crazy, sad statistic. I've seen this multiple times in multiple studies over the last year, but we have gotten so far removed from a whole food diet, from the way that we were designed to eat, that now the average American child, 70% of the calories that they consume on a daily basis throughout their life comes from not just processed food, ultra processed food. And ultra processed food, there's different levels of processing. So processed food, the good is if you look at sauerkraut. Clearly sauerkraut doesn't grow in nature, so that's food processing, but that would be good food processing. And then if you look at something like sandwich meat, if it's done right, can be a minimal processing. But if you look at something like a Dorito, that is it's not food in any way, shape, or form. There's really no food in it. That would be considered ultra-processed food. Doritos, sodas, candy bars, that makes up 70% of the American children's daily calories. And then we wonder why ADHD and autism and allergy rates, and I could go on and on and on, are absolutely through the roof. You don't have to look very far, and it's because we are so far removed from the food that we are designed to eat on a daily basis. So that plays a huge role. And then part of that is if you're eating an ultra-processed food diet, it lacks fiber. It also lacks nutrients. When you lack fiber and you lack nutrients, that feeds bad bacteria and doesn't allow good bacteria to flourish. We know that chronic stress, which sadly most of us are under, also creates leaky gut. Chronic sleep deprivation, chronic dehydration, things that the average American suffers from. Low levels of D3 in our blood plays a huge role in leaky gut. Alcohol consumption, as we talked about earlier, plays a huge role. And we also mentioned lack of exercise plays a huge role. Exposures to toxins and pollution, chlorinated water, all of these things that we talked about earlier for disrupting the microbiome also create a leaky gut. Prescription drugs we talked about. I don't need to go any more detail there. Just to reiterate, yes, they throw off your microbiome, but that also helps to create leaky gut syndrome. Hopefully you understand at this point that you cannot continue to live the way that you are if you're living the average American lifestyle of lack of exercise, lack of water, chronically stressed, sleep deprived, eating ultra-processed foods, taking medications. You can't do that and then expect your gut to be healthy. It's literally impossible. And it is why I can confidently say that the large majority of Americans that are living the standard American lifestyle not only have an unhealthy gut, but they have leaky gut. And when you have just an unhealthy gut, that can lead to a cascade of problems by throwing off the microbiome. When you take it to the next level, that it's been unhealthy for so long, creating this leaky gut, allowing bad bacteria and toxins into your body, chronic inflammation throughout your body, literally even into your brain, which is why it can also cause depression, anxiety, and it's been related to brain diseases like Alzheimer's disease and other neurological disorders, even Parkinson's for that matter. And if you understand those processes, none of that should seem far-fetched in any way, shape, or form. Let's talk about 3 very important bonus aspects. So above and beyond what we usually hear when we're talking about gut health. I just did a recent Facebook post on the appendix. I think this is one of those things that is so misunderstood. And as most people know, the appendix is typically something that we hear like, oh, I just had my appendix out, no big deal. So many people have had their appendix out, and they've had it out because they're 2 reasons. First of all, the appendix became unhealthy, so I'm not suggesting it didn't need to be removed in some situations. But what happens is it's removed and we're told, like, no worries because your appendix really didn't serve a purpose anyway. As part of evolution, usually we're told, and that evolution process, for whatever reason, left the appendix in there. So whether you believe in evolution, whether you believe in God's creation, which is what I believe, the question is the appendix a mistake of evolution or a mistake by God, or is it a gut health hero? And the answer, according to the research for 2+ decades now, the pioneer in this research is now a retired professor from Duke who's been trying to change the standard of care in the medical world for 2 decades. He's been trying to get this word out, and sadly, it falls on deaf ears the majority of the time. But the answer is the appendix is a gut health hero without a doubt. So how does the appendix become a hero? What's its role? Technically, the appendix is an area where the good bacteria in your microbiome can go to recolonize, repopulate, and also in times of distress, it can go there as basically a safe haven. So what does that mean? So an example would be if you get food poisoning and you get some really nasty, bad food poisoning, what happens is because the body is so incredibly intelligent, the good bacteria will flow down into your appendix, and two things happen. Partly, they're there for safety reasons so they don't all get killed off by the bad virus, bad pathogens that just entered your body. And then while they're in there being safe, they're also able to repopulate. They grow and then they can go back out into your intestines to help you fight the battles that you need to fight to keep that immune system strong, help you regain your health. So if you have your appendix, whole food nutrition, which really is just natural inflammatory by nature, will help you keep it. So we don't have to dive into a huge nutrition discussion. If you're just eating a more whole food diet, rich in fruits and vegetables and good quality meats and eggs and nuts and seeds, you're absolutely going to be eating an anti-inflammatory diet. That anti-inflammatory diet is going to help you keep your appendix. If you've had your appendix removed, and this is what I mentioned earlier, this is a huge thing. So many people have had their appendix removed, and because the mindset in the medical world is it's a useless appendage, serves no purpose, so no big deal, we'll take it out and you can just go about living, then there's no recommendations given from there. When if they were following the actual research on the appendix, they would know what I just mentioned, and then talk about two really important things that everybody that's had their appendix should be doing, which is a bare minimum of taking a D3 supplement of 5,000 IU with K2. The reason for the K2 with the D3 is absorption rates. So D3 5,000, K2 daily is huge if you've lost your appendix for many reasons, and one of them is D3 is huge for your immune system. So it helps keep that immune system stronger. And then the second part, and this would be the big, if you're only going to do one, this would be the bigger of the two, and that would be taking a spore-based probiotic on a daily basis. Both of those supplements that I just mentioned, you can find on our website. You always want to make sure you're seeking good, high quality when it comes to supplements, and the supplements that we have on our website are fantastic quality from Nutridyne. The second bonus topic, so bonus topic number one was the appendix. Bonus topic number two is your gallbladder. Well, what do the appendix and the gallbladder have in common? Well, of course, they're part of your gut, but the other is they're the two most commonly removed things in the human body. The gallbladder is removed at such a high rate. It's now 750,000 people in America every single year have their gallbladder removed. 750,000. So what is the gallbladder? The gallbladder stores bile. It is a bile storage area, but it's a bile storage area that sits right below the liver. So what happens is the liver produces bile, and then that bile flows into your gallbladder through a bile duct. And then when needed, meaning that when you're eating fatty foods, good fats or bad fats, ideally good fats, of course, when you're eating that, then the gallbladder goes into action. It gets triggered, and the gallbladder will squeeze bile out of the gallbladder through the duct into the small intestine. And what that bile does is it helps you break down the fat so that you can absorb the good stuff that you need to absorb, and then you can get rid of, through your bowel movements, the bad stuff that you don't need to absorb, or any excess for that matter. So the gallbladder and the bile, if you think of it in this way, that the gallbladder's bile, when it's helping you to break down fat, I've heard this example before, and to me it just makes perfect sense. For anybody that's ever cooked hamburger, for example, in a pan, and then you have the leftover fat that's on the pan. If you take that over to the sink and you try to wash out that pan with cold water, it's really an endless battle. Like, you cannot win that battle. The fat will just stick to the pan. Now you add hot water, a little bit of soap, and all of a sudden you can clean the fat off of that pan easily. And that's really what bile does. The bile helps to get the fat out of your intestines, clear it out of there so it doesn't clog things up. The more fat that we eat, the more bile the gallbladder will inject. So that becomes incredibly important. And that is so important to understand because so many people don't have their gallbladder. And if you don't have a gallbladder, here's what happens. So because of this standpoint that the gallbladder also, they don't necessarily say with this one that it's a useless organ, but they do say that the gallbladder is something that you can easily live without. And that's true. It's not going to kill you if you don't have your gallbladder, certainly not instantly. It does cause problems though. And so people are told that no big deal, we can take out the gallbladder. And the reason for that is because then the liver is still producing the bile, and that bile will drip into your intestines, helping you to break down fats and absorb them and get rid of them and all the stuff that it does. And that's true, but here's where the problems come in. Number one is that liver bile is just constantly dripping into your intestines, but there's no longer a storage container. The gallbladder is gone. And because there's no longer a storage container, you have no control, your body has no control over how much bile is released. And the way that it works is if you, in a normal situation, you have your gallbladder, you eat a small amount of fatty foods, and as a result, the gallbladder will release a little bit of bile. If you eat a large fatty meal, then the gallbladder will release more bile, an equivalent amount to break down the fat because the body is so intelligent. Without the gallbladder being there, you just have this trickle of bile. And if you eat too many fats, all of a sudden you can't break them down. And now they don't get absorbed properly. The intestines start to get clogged and lined with these fats. If you go back to that dish soap example. So that's the first problem that occurs. The second problem that occurs is that in the ideal situation, if you don't have your gallbladder, you're eating small fatty foods, you'd be able to handle all of that just fine. But the problem is that that bile duct often gets blocked, sometimes entirely, sometimes partially. Either way, it reduces the amount of bile, and again, you can't break down fats. So the answer to that, I do have my gallbladder. I do have my appendix. If I didn't, all of the things that I talked about with the appendix, there is no question that D3 with K2, also the probiotics, would be something I would never be without on a daily basis. If I didn't have my gallbladder, bile salts would be something that I would never be without on a daily basis. The bile salts help replace the surge of bile that occurs when that large meal is eaten. So getting that in supplement form becomes huge. On our website, under the gut health category, under Nutridyne, we have a supplement called Digestive Complete. That Digestive Complete, just like it sounds, is a complete digestive product. One of the things in there is bile salts, which are, again, huge if you don't have that gallbladder or if you have a gallbladder that's not functioning properly, which is the case with so many people. Bonus topic number 3. Antibiotics. So I promised earlier when I was talking about antibiotics that we would go into a little bit more detail on this. So first of all, and I think most people can agree that you want to avoid them whenever possible. So even though most people can agree that you want to avoid them whenever possible, for so many people, it's the first line of defense. So you have a slight sniffle and you're running off to your MD to get an antibiotic. You get a cut, you're running off for an antibiotic. Your child has an ear infection, you're running off for an antibiotic. Well, that would be fantastic if the antibiotic did what it's reported to do and just killed the bad bacteria. The problem is it doesn't just do that. It kills off the good bacteria as well. So it's not like it's a smart drug that can detect bad bacteria, kill that, and then save all the good stuff that we need for our gut to be healthy. It destroys the gut microbiome, and I mean destroys it, even one single dose. So I'm not saying don't ever take an antibiotic. What I am saying is make sure that you're not overtaking antibiotics, first of all. And then the ideal situation, what should happen is if you're going in because you have an infection, whether it's a bacterial infection, whether it's an ear infection rather, or some other infection somewhere in the body, your doctor should be testing to prove that it's bacterial before putting it on an antibiotic. So that is supposed to be the normal standard of care. So what we know is that many infections are not bacterial. They're viral infections, they're fungal infections. In fact, a lot of research points to the large majority of ear infections are not bacterial. Some are, certainly, but all they have to do is take a culture to find out. If it's a bacterial, then you can make the decision, okay, do I want to put my child on an antibiotic? If it's not bacterial, the antibiotic makes no sense whatsoever unless your goal is to destroy the gut microbiome and hurt your immune system. And then what we also know about ear infections, for example, this is a really hot topic with me because I think it's so badly mistreated and people are just misinformed. We know that even when it's a bacterial infection, when parents say like, we're going to take the wait and see approach and not go with the antibiotic for now, whether you take an antibiotic for that ear infection or the wait and see approach, the recovery, the healing process is identical. Wait and see approach doesn't come with side effects. The antibiotic approach wreaks havoc on your microbiome, destroying that microbiome, sometimes literally for life. And I'm not trying to scare you here. It's just a fact. And it's why I'm so huge on informing people about this. If you want to Google a little bit more on this, there's a man out of the UK named Tim Spector who has done more research on the microbiome and on antibiotics than anybody else in the world. And he has shown that one course of antibiotics can destroy the microbiome in a huge way. And then you can actively try to restore your microbiome, meaning eating probiotic-rich foods, taking probiotics on a daily basis, whole food diet, and it can still take up to 2 to 2.5 years to restore the microbiome after one course of antibiotics. So that is why I'm so passionate about avoiding those when you can, because that microbiome is so huge for not only our gut health, but our overall health in general. So if you have to go on an antibiotic, what do? Ideal situation, you're taking a double dose of a spore-based probiotic 4 hours after the antibiotic. Why 4 hours? Because you don't want to take it with the antibiotic, because what does the antibiotic do? It kills bacteria. You don't want to take it too close for the same reason. So ideally, you take your antibiotic when you need to. 4 hours later, you take a double dose of a spore-based probiotic to offset those negative effects of the antibiotic. And then you up your intake of fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi and good quality Greek yogurts. Those are the things that you want to do to help offset all of the antibiotic side effects that are created. Let's talk about 5 simple things you can do, and not just simple things that you can do that are literally zero cost to you that will dramatically improve your gut microbiome, your overall health, because you're improving your gut health. Number 1 would be removing, and this is in no particular order, so these 5 different things. 1 would be remove toxins from your life as much as possible. If you've listened to some of my past podcasts, you've heard me talk about a website called EWG.org. EWG stands for Environmental Working Group. They have an amazing website that informs people about toxins in their foods, as well as toxins in cleaning products and toothpaste and shampoos. And if you download their app, you can actually scan a product in the store, find out where it rates from 1 to 10, 10 being it's as toxic as it gets, or 0 for that matter, being no toxicity whatsoever. So start removing toxic products from your life. That will help with your gut microbiome and your overall gut health tremendously. The second tip is eat probiotic-rich foods. So just incorporate more probiotic-rich foods into your diet. So yes, that does cost money, but we're not talking about introducing a supplement here. Fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, Greek yogurt, soy like tempeh and miso. So many great fermented foods out there, pickles for that matter. Fantastic for probiotic-rich foods, which will help feed the good bacteria and make sure that that microbiome stays healthy. The third tip would be prebiotics. Prebiotics are really digestive fibers. So it's what's found in whole foods like fruits and vegetables and mushrooms and garlics. These prebiotics are fantastic for feeding your gut microbiome. And what we know, thanks to especially the work of Tim Spector, who I mentioned, is that if you are eating up to 30 different fruits and vegetables per week, you are giving your microbiome everything it needs to flourish. And here's the reason why. We know that raspberries, for example, will feed a certain class of bacteria in your gut. And that's different from then if you eat a blueberry, if you eat a cashew versus an almond. These things are feeding different classes of bacteria. So the more variety that you're getting, we always hear about eating the rainbow and getting as much variety with fruits and vegetables because of nutrients and antioxidants, and that's true, hugely important, but most people overlook the role that it plays on your gut microbiome. So the wider the variety, the more you can eat, the better. His studies have shown that the average person gets for sure less than 10 on a weekly basis, and if you have less than 10, it's almost a for sure that you have a dysbiosis in your gut, where the bad bacteria outnumbers the good. If you're getting more than 10, you're upping your odds, and the people that get 30 have just an incredible microbiome because they're feeding it on a regular basis. Tip number 4, exercise. Exercise increases the probiotic numbers as well as the diversity, meaning that with a certain class of bacteria, the numbers of that class will increase, but you also grow and increase the diversity of those probiotics, the good bacteria in your gut when you are exercising on a regular basis. And this doesn't mean you have to go out and run a marathon. It doesn't mean you have to do high intensity interval training. It means that you just have to move more. The average American has a crazy sedentary lifestyle and averages about 4,000 steps a day. Bare minimum, you want 10,000 steps, and ideally you're walking on a daily basis. I talked about in my exercise podcast how 3 15-minute walks every day is the ideal situation. And if you can time those post-meal, then everything improves from there. So the ideal situation would be walking more, but walking ideally 3 15-minute walks a day after eating a meal whenever possible. And as a result, that's going to help feed that good bacteria and help those grow in numbers. The 5th tip, we've already talked about this a lot, but I can't overstate it enough, is that whole food diet that has everything you need to feed the good bacteria, and then eliminating the ultra-processed food with the bad sugars and the bad fats that feed the bad bacteria. So I'm going to talk about Tim Spector one last time here, because this guy, the research he's done is really fantastic, and if we listen to it, it can help us tremendously. So Tim Spector, who's done multiple studies, did a study where he was looking at groups of people that were eating different foods and different timings and all kinds of different things. And he wanted at least one person to follow a diet of ultra-processed food, strictly fast food, and really going all out with drinking sodas and diet sodas on a daily basis. And so his son volunteered for this, and he's like, all right, fine, we can do this, I'll pay for it. And what they did was they looked at, with his son, prior to starting this, they measured how many different probiotic classes, species he had in his gut. It was 3,500. So he had 3,500 different classes of bacteria in his gut. And then starting on day 3, and every day they send in poop samples. So you send in these samples to get analyzed and find out what is happening with your gut. Well, starting on day 3, they had already seen that it had just absolutely wreaked havoc on his gut. They stopped the study after day 10 because his son, in 10 days of eating an ultra-processed food diet, had lost 1,400 of the bacteria species. So it's not like he just lost some of his microbiome, that things died off in each species. 1,400 of them no longer existed. He went from 3,500 different species down to approximately 2,100 in a 10-day period of time. So I cannot possibly overstate the importance of avoiding that ultra-processed food and sticking with that whole food diet. And a little sad side note, he says he regrets this tremendously because Obviously, if he would have known that, then he would have never had his son do that, or anybody for that matter. And then the other thing is, now 2 years later, after a dramatic attempt at trying to restore his gut, they still have not gotten it normalized. And this is with daily probiotics, daily fermented foods. They've improved it dramatically. So don't let that be a deterrent to you. You can still improve it dramatically, but you cannot improve it if you continue to eat those bad foods on a daily basis and do all of the other things that wreak havoc on your gut. So bare minimum, you're incorporating the things that we talked about today, those 5 tips. The ideal situation for the average person, especially if you already know you have gut issues or suspect them, is going through a gut healing protocol. I have a gut healing protocol. I call it the 365 protocol. I'm not going to go into the details of that today, but I can tell you it is a fantastic protocol. I'm not going to stand here and say that I feel like it's the best protocol out there. There's many great gut healing protocols. What I can tell you is that many of them fall short because they're just attacking symptoms. They're looking at how do you heal the symptom, how do you get rid of the symptom, and they're not looking at that whole body approach of, yes, let's get rid of the symptom, but let's also do that while building a foundation of health. And of course, foundational health, that's what we do. So that's what all of our protocols include. Get rid of the symptom while building a foundation of health and setting you up for long-term success. So if you go to foundationalhealth365.com, you can find that protocol on there and everything that you need to do to follow that. As always, let's end with inspirational and educational takeaways. Number 1, success. Simple habits performed daily over time. Number 2, go to foundationalhealth365.com and download that 60-day gut healing protocol. If it's not for you, give it to somebody that you love. And you can do that for free, by the way. Number 3, antibiotics. Avoid when possible. And then if you have to take them, supplement with a double dose of probiotics daily, 4 hours after taking the antibiotic. Number 4, if your appendix has been removed, take a daily D3, at least 5,000 IU with K2 and probiotics. Those probiotics, ideally spore-based, and taking that spore-based probiotic also on a daily basis. Number 5, if your gallbladder has been removed, take bile salts, things like Digestive Complete. Focus on eating smaller, fatty meals if you're not taking Digestive Complete. And then number 6, always remember you're a leader. You are a leader. Somebody is watching you. Ideal situation is you're leading by example, not with words, but with actions. So if you enjoyed today's podcast and you found it beneficial, I want you to think about who needs to hear this message and then text them right now. Before you get too busy or distracted, just literally text them with the link to this podcast. Or if you're somebody that I hear this all the time, you're not good with texting links and technology, just text them and say, hey, I want you to check out the Foundational Health Podcast with Dr. Kevin Schultz, episode number 7. I promise this can be life-changing for you. As always, make health your hobby. Thank you for listening to the Foundational Health Podcast. As always, if you would like to learn more about making health your hobby, visit our website at foundationalhealth365.com and follow me on Facebook at Kevin Schultz DC Foundational Health.